We planned our future home on Zillow, meticulously funded by my savings. I never imagined a single family dinner would expose a hidden luxury purchase and a betrayal that cost me everything. The Zillow app was our nightly ritual. Curled up on the couch, my head on his chest, Mark and I would scroll through listings, dreaming about our future. We'd debate the merits of a finished basement versus a larger yard, a modern kitchen versus original hardwood floors. For 2 years, this was our us time, the quiet moments that made all the long hours I worked worth it. I was the planner, the saver. I had a separate high-yield savings account meticulously labeled Future House, and every payday, a significant chunk of my salary went straight into it. Mark called it my superpower. He was more of a live-in-the-moment kind of guy, which I found charming. He was the one who would surprise me with concert tickets or suggest a spontaneous weekend trip. I thought we balanced each other out perfectly. He brought the fun, and I brought the foundation. His mother, Carol, was a constant presence in our lives. We had dinner at her house every Sunday, a tradition Mark insisted on. She was always sweet to me, complimenting my cooking when it was our turn to host, asking about my job at the accounting firm with what seemed like genuine interest. But there were little things, tiny red flags I chose to paint a different color. She'd frequently forget her purse when we went out for a casual lunch, leaving me to pick up the tab. She'd make offhand comments about how lucky I was to afford such nice clothes, always with a sigh that suggested her own fixed income was a heavy burden. Mark would just squeeze my hand under the table, a silent, "Thanks for understanding," that I accepted without question. I told myself I was being a good partner, supportive of the man I loved and his widowed mother. The ambush happened on a Sunday, of course, but this time it was at our apartment. Carol had insisted on bringing over her famous lasagna. The whole evening felt off. She was more effusive than usual, laying the praise on thick. "Oh, Sarah, you've done wonders with this place. Mark is so lucky to have a woman with such good taste." Mark just beamed, soaking it all in. I felt a prickle of unease, the kind you get when you know a conversation is being steered in a direction you don't want to go. After we'd finished eating, as I was clearing the plates, Carol let out a dramatic, shaky sigh. "Is everything okay, Carol?" I asked, pausing by the sink. "Oh, it's nothing, dear. Just adult worries," she said, dabbing at the corner of her eye with a napkin. Mark immediately went to her side, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. He shot me a look, a carefully rehearsed expression of concern that seemed more for my benefit than for hers. "Mom's in a bit of a tight spot," he began, his voice low and serious. "There was a mix-up with the utility company. Some billing errors from months ago they're just now catching. It's a whole mess." I nodded slowly, still holding the plates. "That's awful. How much is it?" Carol sniffled. It's so much. I don't know how I'll ever manage." Mark looked from his mother to me, his face a mask of earnest pleading. "It's $1,000, babe. They're threatening to shut everything off next week." He took a deep breath, and this is where the floor fell out from under me. "So we were thinking, since you have that savings account just sitting there, the one for the house, you could just cover it for her. We'll pay you back, of course, eventually." I stared at him. Not, "Could you help?" Not, "Could we lend her some money?" It was, "You could just cover it." The assumption was breathtaking. The Future House Fund wasn't just my money. It was the physical manifestation of my discipline, my dreams for Giros. It was every late night at the office, every weekend I spent working instead of going out. "Mark," I said, my voice dangerously calm. I put the plates down. "No." The change was instantaneous. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by a cold, hard glare I had never seen before. Carol's facade of the helpless victim crumbled, her expression twisting into one of sour indignation. "What do you mean, no?" Mark's voice rose, cracking the cozy atmosphere of our apartment. "I mean no," I repeated, my own voice gaining strength. "That money is for our down payment. It's for the future we've been planning. $1,000 is a huge setback. Carol will have to call the utility company and set up a payment plan." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His face was turning red, a vein pulsing in his forehead. He took a step towards me, his finger jabbing the air. The charming, carefree man I loved was gone, and in his place was a furious stranger. "A payment plan? Are you serious?" he bellowed, his voice echoing in the small room. "This is my mother. Why aren't you paying for my mother?" The sheer entitlement of the question left me speechless. I just stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. But he wasn't done. He took another step closer, his eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to come from a place much deeper than just this one request. "What do you think I've been doing for the last 6 months?" He spat, his voice dropping to a menacing hiss. "Covering her little shortfalls here and there. That money had to come from somewhere, Sarah. It was coming from us." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Us. The word felt like a slap. I looked from his furious face to his mother, who was now watching me with an expression that was no longer tearful or helpless, but calculating. She was a hawk, and I was the rabbit she'd been patiently waiting to corner. My mind, the one that tracked numbers and balanced spreadsheets for a living, started racing. I paid the rent, the internet, the electricity for our apartment directly from my personal account. The joint account was for groceries, dinners out, shared expenses. I transferred a set amount into it every month, as did he. Or so I thought. "What are you talking about, Mark?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What money from us?" "Don't play dumb, Sarah," he sneered. "The joint account. Mom's needed a little help here and there for the last few months. A new tire for her car, a prescription copay. Her heat bill was a little high one month. I've been covering it. I didn't want to bother you with it." "Bother me?" I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. "You didn't want to bother me with the fact that you were siphoning money from our shared account? Money I put in there for our life together?" The little things suddenly clicked into place. The times he'd said we should skip our date night because money was a little tight. The way he'd brushed it off when I asked if his last commission check had been smaller than usual. It wasn't a tight month. It was him giving our money to his mother behind my back. "It's not siphoning if it's for my family," he yelled. Carol put a hand on his arm, a gesture of faux comfort. "Mark, darling, don't shout," she said softly, then turned her watery eyes to me. "I told him not to. I said you wouldn't understand. I'm just so used to having my husband take care of things. I suppose I'm a bit of a burden now." The manipulation was so blatant, so shameless. It was almost impressive. They were a team. This whole evening, the lasagna, the praise, the dramatic sighs. It was a rehearsed performance designed to get to this exact point. They thought they could bully me, guilt me, into handing over $1,000 from the savings I had worked so hard to build. And his confession wasn't an apology. It was a weapon. He was telling me I owed them this because he'd already been taking from me without my knowledge. "Show me," I said, my voice hardening into something I barely recognized. The shock was burning off, replaced by a cold, clear rage. Mark blinked. "Show you what?" "The bank account. The joint account. Show me the statements. Right now." "Oh, for God's sake, Sarah, you're going to audit me now? Over a few $100s to help my own mother?" He threw his hands up in exasperation, trying to paint me as the cold, heartless bean counter. But I wasn't backing down. The dream of the house with the hardwood floors was already turning to ash in my mouth. This wasn't about a utility bill anymore. This was about trust. This was about everything. "I'm not asking again, Mark. Open the app on your phone or I'll open it on mine." His jaw tightened. For a terrifying second, I thought he was going to refuse, that this would escalate into something physical. Carol watched us, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken betrayals. Finally, with a sharp, angry sigh, he snatched his phone off the counter and jabbed at the screen. He turned it towards me, his hand shaking slightly with rage. "Fine. There. See for yourself. A few small transfers to my mom. Nothing to get your panties in a twist about." I took the phone from his hand, my fingers surprisingly steady. I ignored his snide comment and started scrolling through the transaction history. He was right at first. I saw them. $50 here, $100 there, all labeled with vague descriptions like help or loan. It was more than a few $100s, totaling nearly $800 over 4 months. But that wasn't the part that made my blood run cold. I kept scrolling, my accountant's brain scanning dates and numbers, looking for patterns. I went back 1 month, then 2. And then I saw it. It was a single transaction from 3 weeks ago. It wasn't for $50. It wasn't for $100. It was a debit of $4,500. It completely dwarfed everything else. My breath hitched in my chest. I looked at the payee description, my vision blurring for a second before the words snapped into focus. It wasn't a transfer to Carol. It wasn't a payment to a utility company. It was a payment to something called Prestige Jewelers. Prestige Jewelers? I read the name aloud, the words tasting like poison. The room tilted. $4,500. That was nearly 3 months of my contributions to that account. My eyes darted from the screen to Mark's face. The angry red had drained away, leaving him pale and clammy. He looked like a cornered animal. Carol, for the first time all evening, seemed genuinely thrown off script. Her mouth was a small O of surprise. What is that, Mark? I asked, my voice trembling. I couldn't tear my gaze from his face, searching for any plausible explanation, a single shred of sense in the chaos that had just exploded in our living room. A birthday gift for me? Our anniversary wasn't for months. Christmas? It was May. There was no reason, none that I could fathom, for a purchase that massive from a high-end jewelry store. It's an investment, he stammered, his eyes flickering towards his mother as if looking for a lifeline. A watch, a classic timepiece. They hold their value. It was a smart financial move. A watch. A $4,500 watch was his idea of a smart financial move, while his mother was supposedly on the brink of having her power shut off? The absurdity was so profound, it almost broke through my shock. He was using our shared grocery and bill money, the fund that kept our life running, to buy himself luxury items while simultaneously secretly funding his mother and then trying to raid my personal savings to cover the fallout. It was a tangled web of lies and financial irresponsibility that left me breathless. An investment? I repeated, the phone feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. You used our bill money to buy a designer watch, then lied to me for months about being a little tight, all while you were giving what was left to your mother behind my back? And now you have the nerve to stand here and demand I pay her debts from my house fund? Every word out of my mouth felt like it was carving a deeper chasm between us. The life we had built, the future we dreamed of on the couch scrolling through Zillow, it was all disintegrating in real time. He had no answer. He just stood there, looking at me with a desperate, guilty expression. It wasn't remorse. It was the look of a child caught with his hand deep in the cookie jar. Then Carol found her voice again. Well, a man deserves to have nice things, she said, her tone defensive and sharp. My son works hard. You and your spreadsheets, Sarah, you wouldn't understand. You squeeze all the joy out of life with your constant saving and planning. That was it. That was the final straw. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness on Mark's part. This was their philosophy. They believed they were entitled to my money, the fruits of my labor, my discipline, to fund their whims and cover their irresponsibility. I was the bank, and my only purpose was to provide. I looked at Mark, truly looked at him, and I didn't see the charming, spontaneous man I fell in love with. I saw a weak, entitled boy who had been propped up his entire life by his mother and who now expected me to take over the job. With a click, I screenshotted the transaction history on his phone. I screenshotted the jewelry purchase. I screenshotted every single transfer to his mother. Then I sent them all to my own phone. A little ping confirmed they had arrived. I handed the phone back to Mark, my movements deliberate and calm. The storm inside me had passed, leaving behind a cold, hard certainty. Get out, I said. They both stared at me. What? Mark breathed. I want you both out of my apartment, now. I walked over to the front door and opened it wide. The hallway light spilled into the room, illuminating the ugly scene. You can't be serious, Sarah, Mark sputtered, taking a step towards me. You're kicking me out? Over a little money? It's not my apartment, Sarah. It's our apartment, he said, his voice regaining some of its earlier bluster. My name is on the lease, too. You can't just kick me out. He was right. Legally, he was right. I couldn't force him out this very second. My mind, my beautiful, logical accountant's mind, kicked into high gear. I thought of the lease agreement, the clauses, the legalities, and I thought about the screenshots on my phone. You're right. I said, my voice eerily calm. You have a legal right to be here, but the money in that joint account, about half of that was mine. And the $4,500 you spent on a watch without my consent from an account designated for shared household expenses? I believe that constitutes a form of financial fraud. So here's what's going to happen. You and your mother are going to leave for the night. You're going to go to a hotel or you're going to stay at her place. I don't care. And tomorrow we're going to talk about how you're going to pay me back the thousands of dollars you've stolen from me. Or we can let the police and a lawyer sort it out. The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Carol gasped, clutching her chest theatrically. Mark's face went white as a sheet. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew my job involved staring down financial discrepancies all day. He knew I had the evidence, the temperament, and now the motivation to follow through. He looked at his mother, then back at me, a silent, furious battle raging in his eyes. He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. There's one more thing, I said, walking past them to the small table by the door where we kept our keys. I picked up my key ring. Then I picked up his. I walked back to the open doorway, looked him dead in the eye, and without breaking eye contact, I tossed his keys out into the hallway. They landed with a metallic clatter on the tile floor, a sound that echoed the final shattering break between us. I took a step back inside. I've just changed my mind. Get out of my apartment. Mark stared at the keys on the floor, then at me, his face a cocktail of disbelief and fury. You're crazy, he whispered, his bravado completely gone. For a moment, I thought he might push past me, try to force the issue. But the sight of my phone in my hand, my thumb hovering over my lawyer's contact information, seemed to drain the fight out of him. He knew he was caught. The paper trail was undeniable. Carol, however, was not so easily defeated. You little witch, she hissed, her sweet old lady mask completely gone, revealing the venomous face beneath. After everything we've done for you, welcomed you into our family. Welcomed me? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You welcomed my wallet, not me. I pointed a finger at the door. Leave, before I call security and have you both escorted out for trespassing. And Mark, don't think for a second that your name on the lease protects you from a restraining order, especially when I have documented proof you've been stealing from me. That was the final blow. The threat of legal action, of public humiliation, was something they couldn't fight. Defeated, Mark bent down, snatched his keys from the hallway floor, and without another word, turned and walked away. Carol shot me one last glare filled with pure hatred before scurrying after him, her famous lasagna sitting abandoned on my coffee table like a sad, cheesy monument to their failed con. I shut the door, locked the deadbolt, and leaned against it, my body finally allowing itself to tremble. The silence in the apartment was deafening. The dream wasn't just dead, it had been alive from the start. The next morning, I was a woman on a mission. I didn't cry. I organized. I transferred the remaining funds from the joint account into my personal one, meticulously documenting the amounts. I then calculated exactly how much Mark owed me. His half of the shared expenses he'd failed to cover by giving the money to his mother, plus the entirety of the watch purchase, since that was in no way a shared expense. The total came to a sickening $5,650. I drafted an email with the precision of an audit report, attaching the bank statements and the screenshots. The subject line was simple: repayment plan. I outlined two options. He could sign a legally binding agreement to pay me back in monthly installments, or I would proceed with filing a civil suit and a police report for fraud. I gave him 24 hours to respond. His response came in just under 2 hours. It was a single sentence: I'll sign whatever you want, just don't do this. The pathetic plea only strengthened my resolve. We met at a notary's office the next day. He looked terrible, exhausted, unshaven, and smaller than I'd ever seen him. He didn't look at me once as he signed the papers I'd had my lawyer draft. He agreed to move his things out by the end of the week and to pay me a significant portion of his salary every month until the debt was cleared. He was trapped, and he knew it. The week he moved out was agony. Seeing the empty spaces where his things used to be was a constant, painful reminder of the future I had lost. But with every box he carried out the door, I felt a little lighter. I was purging not just his belongings, but the weight of his lies and his mother's parasitic influence. The last time I saw him, he was loading a box into his car. He finally looked at me, his eyes full of a strange mix of regret and resentment. "I did love you, you know," he said quietly. "No, you didn't," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "You loved what I provided. There's a difference." I turned and walked back into my apartment, closing the door on him for the last time. The next few months were about rebuilding. I sold the couch we'd dreamed on and bought a new one, just for me. I painted the living room a color he would have hated. I started filling the future house fund again, but this time it was labeled My Future. The monthly payments from Mark arrived like clockwork, a grim reminder of his betrayal, but also a satisfying confirmation of my victory. About 6 months later, I ran into a former colleague of his at a coffee shop. After some awkward small talk, he hesitantly asked if I'd heard about Mark. I said I hadn't. He told me that Mark had to sell the expensive investment watch at a massive loss to make his first few payments to me. The real kicker, though, was that he had moved back in with his mother. Apparently, without my income to supplement their lifestyle, they could no longer afford her house. They were in the process of selling it to move into a tiny one-bedroom condo. I pictured them there, a king and his queen mother in their cramped, downsized castle, their kingdom of entitlement having crumbled into dust. I felt a surge of something that wasn't joy, but a deep, profound sense of justice. A quiet satisfaction. I had my money back. I had my apartment. I had my life back. They had each other. I walked out of that coffee shop, took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely, utterly, and gloriously free. My future was my own, built on a foundation of my own making, and there wasn't a single Zillow listing in the world that looked as beautiful as that.